welcome to the all-new 5th generation Land Rover Range Rover. This example here is a pre-production demonstrator, a P530 long wheelbase 7-seater version with Autobiography trim. That means it's pretty much filled to the brim with the optional extras. So of course, I decided to use the chance to check it out at my local Land Rover dealership. Therefore, I'm super grateful for the opportunity. Huge thanks to Inchcape JLR Tallinn. First off, let's go over the exterior. What has changed compared to the previous generations, especially the predecessor L405 Range Rover? Well, some are complaining that the new one is too similar to the old one, mainly the front end. To some extent, I understand them. Indeed, usually when a brand new Range Rover generation is introduced, it's a substantial step forward. Remember when the very successful 3rd gen L322 was introduced back in 2001, what a timeless design. And then in 2012, the 4th generation, also known as the L405, was introduced. Honestly, it feels like that it was yesterday. The 405 retained the general shape of its predecessor, but the good old 3rd generation looked definitely outdated next to it. And for the record, the new Range Rover is designated as an L460 generation. Now, let's get more specific comparing the upcoming model to its predecessor. Front-end wise, I'm confident that we are talking about evolution rather than revolution. The grille is very similar to the old one, and the styling cues of the headlights are generally the same, but they are noticeably slimmer on the new one. Also, the turn signals are animated or sequential, as they say. The lower area is also similar, but it's cleaned up, straight lines and simple rectangular sections. Overall, I would sum up the front end using a very cliché expression: when it ain't broken, don't fix it. The previous generation had a gorgeous, timeless front end. Why should he mess it up? Especially at the times when too many established high-end automakers are taking huge risks to experience with the design. And by the way, this new Range Rover is actually narrower width-wise by 26mm. Moving on to the side, the general shape and profile has undoubtedly retained the classic, timeless look of a Range Rover. Some styling cues from the previous generation remain, but the approach is different. For example, the so-called gill, which was rather prominent on the last gen, is replaced by this very clean-looking minimalist piece. For minimalism's sake, the lower stripe piece is also gone. A very cool touch is this lower gloss black area. On closer inspection, it appears to be some kind of rail. The door handles are flush with the body. When unlocked, they just quietly whirl out. Now, the wheels. Well, they are huge, ranging from 21 to 23 inches, depending on the trim. This particular example has 22s fitted. Overall, I think the side design of the new Range Rover is the cleanest compared to the front and rear. What I most love about the side is the fact that they have managed to clean up the weather stripping. That's genius in both engineering and design wise. Also, for some reason, they added this silver piece in the rear. Maybe they didn't want to go too minimalist. There are two so-called body types available, just like the outgoing generation: the standard wheelbase and the top-of-the-line long wheelbase, which has a 200mm longer wheelbase, again just like the predecessor. Overall, the new one is 53mm longer, while the wheelbase has been grown by a quite remarkable 75mm. Height is basically unchanged, and the highest air suspension setting, the new one, is only 1 mm higher. Moving on to the rear, where the changes are substantial compared to the last generation. I've heard that the rear lights are a little bit controversial, maybe thanks to the shitbox tuners who like to tint their rear lights. But come on, these ones here are very original and suit well to the character of the vehicle, especially because The same gloss black trim is horizontally carried on under the rear Range Rover lettering. Land Rover has been rather brave while designing the rear lights on the last 3 generations of Range Rovers. Remember, the L322 had glare taillights, and the previous generation also had pretty rad and busy taillights. I'm glad that they carry on the tradition to surprise us with adventurous taillights. And again, the turn signals are animated, just like the front ones, of course. Yes, there are some similarities with the past generations. 2 main traditions are continued, which are sort of the trademark for Range Rovers: the hidden rear wiper blade on top of the rear window, and the legendary 2-part split tailgate, which is of course fully electrically operated. Plus, it also has a hands-free function as standard. And, in classic Range Rover fashion, the exhaust tips are not visible. They are hidden under the car, so fake exhaust tips are fortunately out of the question. The so-called tailgate area has been vastly improved. The parcel shelf is now electric on higher specification models, except for the 7-seaters like this one. As an optional extra, there are also leather-covered tailgate cushions available. What's also neat is the cargo separator, which is very flexible, nice for taming groceries and wine bottles while off-roading, for example. On the right wall of the cargo room, there's a sea of buttons. Most of them are touch-sensitive for lowering the rear suspension or unfolding the second, or if optioned, the third seat row. Unfortunately, this demonstrator wasn't hooked up to the battery tender and it was running out of battery, so I couldn't demonstrate the tailgate operation or seat folding. Nevertheless, let's briefly go over the third row. Now, this is the first time ever when you can option your Range Rover with the third row. That said, it's only available for the long wheelbase model. Land Rover states in the press release that in the all-new Range Rover, everyone travels in the first class, including the third row passengers. What about the roof? Well, there are 3 main roof-related subjects to go over. First off, the panoramic roof. Yes, it's a regular glass roof, nothing extraordinary here, but from now on, it's standard across the range. Yes, all of the L460 Range Rovers will have a panoramic roof. Maybe not in all markets, but in my area that's the case. Furthermore, there are 2 versions of it. On the lower trims, the glass part is fixed. On the higher trims, it can be opened electrically. Then the color of the roof. As an optional extra, for around 1000 euros, the roof can be painted gloss black. As you can see, this demonstrator has a body-colored roof, but like the outgoing model, the A-pillars will be gloss black across the range. To wrap up the roof section, let's talk about these 2 shark fins here. One of them is a 5G capable antenna, the other is a camera for a player sight rear view mirror camera system. This will be standard all across the range, except for the entry-level SE trim. Now, I've been mentioning the trims quite a lot, so before we tackle the interior, let's go over the available trims and powertrains. We start with the powertrains, and there's a good variety available right from the beginning of the new model's life cycle. Overall, there are astonishing 4 types of powertrain categories: mild hybrid diesels, mild hybrid gasolines, plug-in hybrid gasolines, and almighty BMW-sourced twin-turbo V8, which is the first time ever for Land Rover to use that particular engine. The rest of the engines are JLR's own Ingenium family units. I'm more than happy to see so much diversity. Here's a table of different trim, body style and engine combinations. Note that these combinations are market specific. For example, in the press materials there's a P360 version, but I wasn't able to figure out the markets it was available on. This table contains the combinations that are available in Europe. Body style wise, the long wheelbase versions are not available with entry-level diesel engines, and the plug-in hybrids aren't available as 7-seaters. Let's talk about trims then. Altogether, there are 5 in total. Good old SE and HSC, high specification Autobiography, and I suppose a limited version called First Edition, which is like Autobiography Plus with some unique styling elements. Top of the line trim is called SV, which is very exclusive and significantly pricier with specific styling elements inside and out, and the SV versions are meant to compete with Bentley Bentayga. Generally, higher trim means less engine options, and vice versa. Weaker the engine, smaller the trim options. Most so-called flexible engines regarding the trim levels are the D350 and surprisingly the P530, at least in Europe. Onwards to the interior, we'll start with the rear seating area. As I mentioned in the beginning, this one here is a 7-seater, long wheelbase Autobiography example. That means there's significantly more legroom thanks to the 200mm longer wheelbase. Here we can find electrically adjustable memory seats, which are both heated and cooled. The rear electrically adjustable and heated seats come as standard across the model range, but in the Autobiography trim like this one, they are also cooled. As an optional extra, the 2-seat configuration with hot stone massage function is also available. Then there's a 4-zone climate system, electric rear blinds, and you can operate both windows on either side. Those screens here are optional for around 3,000 euros. Otherwise, as expected, the rear seat is very plush and comfortable, plenty of room here. Illuminated seatbelt buckles are very neat touch, and they also come as standard. I have only one complaint. The storage cubby in the rear handrest is a bit difficult to open and it feels very cheap compared to the rest of the interior, but I really think this problem will be solved when they start regular production. And by the way, this is one and only complaint overall in the whole car. Next up, let's carry on with the driver's and front passenger area. The dashboard design is similar to the predecessor, but again, it has been simplified and cleaned up a bit. Mainly the air vents, which are slimmer, horizontally positioned and low-key. Then there's the steering wheel, which is 2-spoke now, I suppose. I very much like the paddle shifters, which are unusually long. Electric steering column adjustment is standard as usual. Heated steering wheel is optional for the SC and HSC trims. On higher trims, it's included. The instrument cluster is a digital screen across the range as expected, but it's not a traditional rectangle, which is rather cool touch. The graphics and interface are the same as in other current Land Rover models. The head-up display is standard for all the trims except the entry-level SC, and the windshield is heated as standard. Unlike the L405 facelift, which came with 2 screens in the center, this one comes with one rather large 13.7-inch display, which is also curved. Graphical interface is again the same as the rest of the Land Rover's lineup. There's also an option to enable or disable the haptic feedback function. Voice commands are dealt with via Amazon's Alexa Assistant. Climate buttons are physical and they are multifunctional, again similar to the other JLR models. Moving on, the gear selector has been changed. JLR's famous rotary wheel has been dropped and it's replaced with a more traditional selector, which is very convenient to use and doesn't need much time to get used to, unlike the previous selector. Now I also want to mention the optional ceramic button and gear lever finishes on the SV trim models. These are next level cool. Practicality wise, the traditional 2 glove boxes are still here and the seatbelt buckles are illuminated again, like the rear ones, of course. I also want to point out the 2-piece sunblinds and optional refrigerator compartment between the front seats. The materials and quality of them is stunning as expected. This is just perfect. I have no other words to describe it. Even the grab handle is a very high quality item, and the action and mechanics of it is over the top. The key is the same like other Land Rover models, and there's also an optional activity key available, which is basically a rubberized bracelet. Talking about the optional extras, for the first time ever there are power assisted doors available which open within 3 seconds when used. We are talking about Rolls-Royce level here. They are standard for the SV trim, otherwise they cost around €2,000. Now, the main question, what about the pricing? In German market, the price gap between the new and old base models is rather significant, €13,000. That said, in my opinion, it's justified. You get more stuff as standard. Also, the body of the vehicle is more sophisticated and rigid, 50% stiffer and also EV ready. In 2023, the full electric Range Rover is coming. Furthermore, the drivetrain is more sophisticated. You see, this Range Rover won't always be in a 4-wheel drive mode. They call it an intelligent all-wheel drive. Grip levels and driver's inputs are monitored 100 times per second. All-wheel drive is activated when driving off-road, pulling away from standstill, in cold weather below 3 degrees Celsius, or speeds over 160 kilometers per hour. All of that makes the vehicle more efficient. And all new Range Rovers come with a 4-wheel steering system, which increases maneuverability on low speeds and stability on higher speeds. Plus, the suspension system is designed from the ground up with Bilstein 2-valve active dampers, which can react in 12 milliseconds to adjust themselves according to the changes of surface it's driving on. Let's go over the standard trim and equipment compared to the predecessor. Despite starting from the SE trim, the new one has clearly more features than the previous model, whose base trim was HSC, at least according to the German market price lists, which this comparison is based on. Some of the highlights from the standard equipment list are 4-wheel steering, panorama roof, illuminated seatbelt buckles and flush door handles as mentioned earlier. Then there's a bunch of features as standard. That means the new SE trim is a combination of the L405's Vogue and Autobiography trim. So I find it unfair to compare the old base with the new base. For example, the new one has soft closed doors as standard. Then the rear seats are heated and come with an electric backrest. The old one had a reversing camera instead of a 3D system. And I'm not going to mention the driver aids. Finally, the adaptive cruise control is standard on the Range Rover. So, how to make a fair comparison between the old and the new? After digging around the German market price lists, I can say the following. It's complicated because of the trim differences, which makes it unfair for both of them. But one thing is certain, you get significantly more equipment when you get the new one. Usually, I'm not into base models at all, but in the case for the new Range Rover, I would be more than satisfied to rock an SE trim. And last but not least, I want to go over the available sound systems. There are a total of 3 Meridian systems to choose from. This one here has the top of the line signature system, which consists of whopping 35 speakers, including the subwoofer. Total output is mind-blowing 1680 watts. This is one mad system, and it gets even crazier. This is the first time ever for Land Rover to put the speakers to the headrests. Easiest way to identify the signature system is by looking at the rear side of the backrests of the first row seats. There's this rather large rectangular speaker when the owner has checked the signature system box. And great news, it's standard for the Autobiography trim. Then there's an 800 watt mid-tier Meridian 3D surround sound system, which is standard for the HSC trim. And finally, the entry-level 400-watt Meridian system. In conclusion, the new Range Rover is a rather hefty step above the previous generation, and it's worthy competitor to the Bentley Bentayga, including the lower trim versions. Thanks for watching.